Welcome back to the blinding lights of the new studio. Sober Girl Society legend, Miss Millie Gooch.
Thank you. Oh my God, what a pleasure. I can't believe how sparkly and cool it is.
Well, we just felt like, we had you on season 1 and that was amazing. And then since then, you've kind of been like our sober guru and you've enlightened our worlds. Like
the Obi-Wan Kenobi.
We wanted you back here in the shining light so everyone can see your beautiful face.
I'm honoured, honestly. And this time I won't leave fake tan on your sofa like I did last time.
Because we recorded like the heat of summer, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was so hot. And I was on the boat and I was like sweating.
Because I wasn't had the aircon on.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God.
I was like, really sorry, we'll clean it up. I like got out like the anti-bac.
Dear me, how you been?
Yeah, all good. Busy. I've just come to the end of uni pretty much now, which is good. So
that's gone quick though.
It's gone really quick. So I started in September, lectures finish in May. I've just got to do my dissertation, which is on Sober Podcast. So that'll be exciting.
Step into our office.
Yeah.
How's it been?
Good. It's been like incredible. I feel like it's broken down everything I knew about sobriety and addiction and kind of rebuilt it back up again. And if anything, though, I think I'm more confused because the answer is really there is no answer.
Yeah.
So everyone has different theories on addiction and how it came to be and what the biggest influences are. So I feel like I've learned so much, but almost learned nothing at all because it's like you just started back from where you were.
Isn't that just life?
Yeah, exactly.
That is life. The more you know, the more you realise you don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's when you're getting it.
I found out yesterday that in every law firm, there's someone that is just called the knowledge. And that their role is to like uphold the law within the law firm. So maybe you can just be like the knowledge of sobriety.
Oh my God, I would love that.
I reckon they're just like a floating orb. They're not even a real person. They just float in like a...
I think you should change your name to that.
Oh
Millie,
my
Millie, the knowledge Gooch.
Oh my God, I would love that. Gooch just doesn't go with anything though, does it? Like, I just want to get rid of that surname, but it helps people remember you, so.
This is true. But I like the knowledge. That's an interesting fact.
Yeah,
So here we are. But well, thanks for joining us again, and we've got like various things to discuss. First and foremost, you have a book coming out.
I do, yes.
That's very exciting.
Really exciting, and it's different to the first one. So the first one was like kind of about me, and this one is about you, and not you as in you two, because that'd be weird if I wrote a whole book
to be honest,
about
Millie,
you
like we've
two.
become that close. I'd be really surprised if you wanted to biography.
You'll just start reading it and be like, hang on a minute.
It's just book just called Two Wankers.
Yeah. But like when I found the process of writing the book like so cathartic, and like just my head around sobriety was always so messy, and to kind of untangle that I think was really helpful. So this is like a guided journal. So it's like every prompt that you would need to kind of untangle all the feelings you're having about sobriety or not drinking. So it kind of guides you through the process, everything from like breaking up with booze to like creating a life you love without alcohol. And I think I hope that people will get the benefit that I got of writing the book, is that they get the opportunity to write their own story, which I think as someone who loves writing can be like really powerful. I know it sounds cliche, but sometimes when you've just got so much going on in your head, like to me writing is like the closest thing to therapy.
Yeah.
You're just getting it out there.
It's fascinating that actually it's something we're offering with our new Patreon, which is like for people to come and have like a 30-minute kind of Zoom narrative chat with us, just for themselves. So it's like just verbalizing that story, that narrative, why you went sober, what your values are, and kind of what you want to achieve out of it. Because I found even with our podcast, like this might sound really self-indulgent, but sometimes if I'm having a rough day, I'll go back and listen to like little sections of the pod you did with me, because it will just reinforce like, oh, that's where I was in this point and that's where I am now. So what an amazing tool you can offer people to kind of just look back. And there's a thing with sobriety, isn't it, where it has to be a bit self-indulgent, because otherwise like, who are you doing it for? Yeah. Like it's one of the most selfish things you can do. Yeah. So I think to be able to like package that in a way that you can just contextualize, it's amazing.
Thank you. Oh, thanks guys. I'll make sure you get a copy.
I can't wait to do it. I'm going to do my own.
Yeah, well, it's for like anyone at any stage. So it can be like people who are just starting their sobriety journey, or people who have been like on it for a while, because I think there's always points in your journey where you can get a bit complacent, or you have a bit of a wobble. Like it's been 6.5 years, and there's been so many times when I've been like, oh, like I'm not feeling great about it at the moment, even though I have no intention to drink. Sometimes that your mental state might not be right, and you flip back and forth a little bit. So I think it's just a tool that you can always have in your back pocket, and it's illustrated, which is always fun.
That's very cool.
Who's done the illustrations?
Not me, because I can't.
I was going to say,
shit. I can't even draw stick men. And the thing is, they're like, "Oh, do you want to illustrate it?" And you're like, "No."
That would drive people to
dream me. That's really interesting, though. The what you're saying about complacency.
Yeah.
Because I've felt it a couple of times, and I think what I'm learning is just to try and prepare as much as possible, especially for like social stuff, which is really important. I definitely got like, sideswiped on New Year's Eve. I just didn't really, I went into it being like, this will be a breeze, I didn't even need to worry about it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like, from going and having like a meal with all my mates in like a private room to then being put downstairs with the public, and then lots of drunk people, because New Year's is a time when everyone gets on it. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. I need to leave, and like really felt it. And there's been a couple of times where, complacency has been there, but you have to learn, right?
Yeah. And it, like you said, it sometimes comes when you least expect it. Like, you'll be like, this is fine, I've got this. And you'll be like, I'm not entirely sure I do. But like, that's why things like this are amazing, because you can, like, one of the kind of biggest things that came out of the research around like sober podcasts is you can get it anywhere at any time. Like, if you had a wobble, you could literally go off to the toilet and like listen to an episode. Like, that accessibility and ease, you couldn't do that with like just calling your therapist. They'd be like, it's out of hours, like you're not paying me. Like, with like podcasts and things like that, it's great because you can just go off and access that help at any time.
It's fascinating you say that, because we've actually received a few messages, haven't we, that, again, I don't want this to sound self-indulgent or self-praising at all, but people that have been like, oh, I was having a wobble and then I whacked this on in the car and it just kind of reminded me why I don't. Or we had someone really nice, didn't we, that their partner still drinks and they were having a wobble at the wedding, and the partner had been like, oh, what would Jamie and Tom say? And you're right, I think podcasts are that thing, and I've had it a few times where you just have that instant like, okay, I'm just settling now. It's fascinating, actually. I never really thought about it in that much depth.
And even like, there are a lot of other kind of tools out there that are free, but with podcasts as well, like, you don't even need to leave the house. Like, there's still barriers to like getting to a meeting or going to therapy, whether that's, like getting in the car, organising like where the kids are going to be so that you can go off and have an hour. Like, you've still got a lot of like logistical things, whereas with this, there's almost like no logistics to it. Within 1 second, you can kind of have like help and advice and a friendly ear at your fingertips, which is so helpful.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, I think, what date's the book out?
In November, mid-November.
Mid-November.
And can be pre-ordered from?
You can pre-order from anywhere you like, all the good bookshops, Amazon, Waterstones, you name it.
Other bookshops are available.
Yeah, there are lots of different bookshops. Lots of independents as well.
Amazing. How have you found that process for you? Like I know you said it was cathartic. Do you enjoy it? Like, does it put a stress on you, or do you feel like, does it reinforce your sobriety? And
yeah, I think it reinforces always. I think it like, writing a book is always going to be stressful, because the biggest thing for me is you can't like delete it. So with like social, even with a podcast, if in like 6 months time you're like, oh my God, do you know what, I hate that, you can disappear it off the internet. You can't do that with a book. It's always there. So like, I can't even look at my first book now without getting anxiety, and I have not read the contents of it. Like, people send me nice messages like, oh, I love this section. I'm like, oh, I don't remember that section, because I can't think about it, because I worry that if I read it too much, I'll want to change it and I want to do things. That's the biggest thing for me as like a tiny little control freak, that once it's in the world, it's in the world, and you can't change it and you can't take it back. That for me is the stressful part.
Do you feel the same with songs?
I was about to say, like, I feel like it's very similar in that respect, because now listening back to some of the songs, even from like 6 months ago that came out, now as you like learn more and you're like, you evolve, and as culture evolves as well, right? You listen back and you're like, I could have done that differently, or I would have done that better, or the mix isn't quite right on that. And then you listen back to songs from a few years ago and you're like, what was I doing? And I can imagine it's very, very similar. You do something, and at the time it was like the best work that you can do, and that's all you have to remember, is that at the time that was, representative of like what you felt, and what you were doing. And I think it's very, very similar in that respect. So, but I don't really listen to too much old stuff.
It's just hard to like, not see it with the mind that you've got now. Like you said, and you're constantly evolving. Like, I believe the biggest misconception is like, well, people can't change. Like, people change all the time, and then like your values change, and like you said, your opinions change, and you just want to like add things, and like, you get new skills, and I'd love to add more to the book. I'd rewrite that book like over and over and over again every year if they let me. Just add new bits.
Do you reckon the Baha Man is sat here like 20 years later being like, fuck, who did let the dogs out? Why did we do that?
Maybe they finally know who let the dogs out, and they're like, oh, we could go back and actually tell everyone. It's still a mystery.
Maybe they should really do a new one called like Steve Let the Dogs Out.
Fuck you, Steve.
Do it. But so part of the reason for your comeback onto the podcast.
The Big Bad Return.
The Big Bad Return is we've had a lot of people that have been asking us to discuss sober dating.
Yeah.
So we thought it'd be great to get you back on to talk about this. I mean, like I said, you are the guru. You're the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the sober world. And I thought it'd be great to have a conversation. And we can be open about our experiences, being married to someone that does drink but doesn't drink very much. Jamie with, your partner who also doesn't drink.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I thought it would just be great to kind of get into it and see what the world looks like in the world of sober dating and advice and tips and all of that stuff. So we should probably get into it.
Yeah, where do you want to kick off? I like how we're all awkwardly sat here being like,
where should we begin?
Well, okay, I guess the thing is, so we did an episode with Tawny, which was really interesting, but it was definitely based a lot around intimacy.
Yes.
And I think that was more around like, if you've gone sober, a lot of the time you use alcohol to sort of loosen up and maybe find that physical connection. And then kind of the takeaway from that was that in sobriety, emotional connection's there, and that probably leads to better physical connection, right? But I think they strip all of that back into the terms of like dating apps, Hinge, Tinder, meeting someone for the first time, because often you're meeting someone in a bar, naturally there's drinks there. What's been kind of your experience, or from a female's perspective within Sober Girl Society, kind of what's the talk on the street about how to approach those things?
Yeah, well, I mean, the good news is that sober dating is on the rise. So Tinder actually did a really interesting future of dating report, and one of the biggest trends that they came out with was that dry dating was like basically on the up. And they had this really incredible stat, and I don't know the exact statistics, but it was basically around the emoji use of wine and beer emojis on people's dating profiles had actually decreased. So that was like a really interesting thing in itself. Don't know if it's, general emoji use has increased, but they said specifically like those two. And that more people were opting for like activity dates as well. That was a big thing. So it's definitely on the rise. So that's like positive news for everyone. And also a lot of the apps now, you can really toggle what you put on your profile, like even sober curious, sober, alcohol free, teetotal, like they have a lot of different words. Yeah, former record. That's what I meant on mine.
Absolute canine. Yeah.
But interestingly, I have never put on any of my dating profiles that I'm sober, because several reasons. I find if people see that, they think that that's your entire personality, which some might argue for me doing what I do.
After we sat here like, fuck, I feel so seen.
Someone commented on one of my posts not long ago, like, oh, so you swapped your like personality of drinking for personality of sobriety, and I was like, I'm called out there very much. But I think people will then just see you as like the sober person. But also I think like we are so plugged into this like sobriety world, community, everything. And a lot of people aren't. So I've been on dates with people that don't even know like alcohol-free beer exists, don't know there is such a thing as a sober podcast. If you said, oh, do you listen to sober podcasts? They'd be like, what is a sober podcast?
Yeah.
Like, they have no idea. And so they might be put off by that in your profile, but actually as soon as they get to know you, it might be a really cool thing that they become interested in. And it's not that they don't like you automatically because of that thing, but it's just we as a society have preconceptions about people who are sober. So it's been really interesting to go on dates with people and then like tell them beforehand that I'm sober, see that their reaction is like kind of neutral, but then actually it's something that they become really interested in. So that for me is just, I don't put it on my profile, but a lot of people do.
Have you had any classic men being like, why don't you drink?
Yes, do you know what, weirdly though, so not so much anymore. So when I first stopped drinking, I was single, and that was like 6.5 years ago, perceptions were way worse. I actually had one boy, and this is the most revolting thing anyone said, how will I get into your knickers if you don't drink? Genuinely. And I was like, like, that is the worst, instant block, like,
I feel I'm sorry on behalf of all men.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And I was like, well, I don't really know what you want me to tell you.
That is the biggest red flag.
Isn't it?
He's waving it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, so I think it was Laura Willoughby from Club Soda. She said the best line, and it's that sobriety is an instant dickhead detector, which I think is like so great, because it just, people reveal themselves to you when they like you say things like that. So I had that comment, but weirdly, like the last time I was single and on dating apps, so like 6 months ago, like the reactions are so different.
Interesting.
It has definitely evolved as a society, and I always say it's a bit like 6 degrees of sober separation now, and everyone knows someone who doesn't drink. So I'll say it, and even if they're like a drinker, they'll be like, oh, my friend doesn't drink, or my cousin doesn't drink, or someone they know doesn't drink, and there's more curiosity around it rather than like instant shutdown. So like so I was single about like 3 years ago, and then single about 6 months ago. And both times now, I've never had a negative reaction to it, which is really interesting.
Interesting. And you had nothing on your profile, nothing at all.
Nothing
And
on
it
my
was just
profile.
like evolved from app to text.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't drink. Go
Yeah.
on dates, maybe have a little chat about it, but it not feel like it was the consuming factor.
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of drop it in really subtly when people say like, oh, do you want to go for a drink? I'll be like, you know, absolutely, but just let you know I don't drink alcohol, but like still happy to go to bars and clubs, or like not a club. I'm not really sure how I feel like a club on a
First date, let's fucking go to Fabric.
Yeah. To be fair, I probably would. But yeah, that's sort of normally when I tell people.
Interesting. And did you ever, sorry to go like personalist, but I think
you can go as personal as you like. We're all friends here.
Did you ever go on dates where you felt like someone was drinking, which might seem normal to them, but like what maybe was a little problematic? Like I've noticed it when sometimes you go for a pint with someone, even now as a mate, and by the time you've had like one Diet Coke, they've had like 3 pints, and you're like, oh, okay. Did you have any experience of that in the dating
Weirdly,
lane?
no. And I always think it's because where I don't drink, they either feel like they've got an excuse to drink less, or they do, I don't know, maybe feel a bit more conscious about it. So I personally have never been on a date. That said, I've had girls message me with horrific experiences of like, they've told someone they're sober, they've been on the date, and then that person's off doing coke in the toilet. So it does happen, but I've been really lucky. But I think I also maybe have a natural filtering process in my head when I am looking on dating apps. So, you know, if someone's thing is like, oh, I'm looking for someone to drink espresso martinis with, I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to be me. So I won't go for people like that. I won't necessarily swipe on people where every single post is like them out drinking. Yeah. So I think maybe I have that natural filter already in my head to
like Ocean Beach, fuck off.
Yeah, like if they've got a massive bottle of Grey Goose, or they're like spraying shit everywhere, I'm like, do you know what? But I'm trying to save them as well. It's not that I'm judging them. I just think, do you know what? You're probably not going to have the best time with me, so I'm going to save that. Like, you're going to find someone else who you can drink espresso martinis with. So yeah, I think maybe I've also got a bit of a natural filtering process.
That's interesting. And when you were on the kind of dating apps, were you quite open to dating people that would drink?
Yeah, I think I've always said like the person I am with doesn't need to be sober, as long as they're like respectful of my choice to be sober and never like make comments about it, and also just have a bit more of a lifestyle that leans more towards other things that isn't drinking. So like I think I would personally find it hard to be with someone who wants to just get on it like every Friday and Saturday and then be hungover on Sunday, because our lifestyles just wouldn't align.
Yeah, just wouldn't compute.
Yeah, we would be on different wavelengths, different times.
Honestly, like being on a different time zone.
Exactly, because like, you know, you're waking up and they've just like got in from a night out, and you know, if that happens every once in a while, fine, but I just personally, that's not for me. But it's the same way, like you want to align with someone that you have like a good lifestyle with. I don't know, if you're really into gaming, maybe you want to find someone else who games. Like it's just, you want to find people who are kind of aligned that way, but it's not a deal breaker for me if someone drinks.
Well, it's good to know that that's like a perspective, and you know, I haven't been single for a long time now, but you know, with Sarah still drinks, and it's, you know, I think she can take it or leave it, and it's, you know, I'm envious of people like her.
Yeah. How do they do it? I just
it's very unfair.
I just don't know, but it's nice to hear that, like, I guess other people's takes on sobriety, especially in the dating world, is very much more open than perhaps it was. And I think like you say, the kind of the degrees of separation, now everyone knows a sober person. You know, anyone that's like watching the Grand Prix notices that, you know, zeros are being advertised a lot more, even if it might be a kind of ploy to advertise a real thing, but it's still like zero's still there. And like same in like with football, it's there, you know, it's at football grounds. I think like go back 6-7 years, I get it. Like people probably didn't know it existed as much, and it was still Beck's Blue, and there wasn't really a lot going on. Whereas now there is. So I think for most people, it probably isn't as much of like a taboo if you don't drink. And also like sometimes now people didn't necessarily have. Some people just don't care if you drink or don't drink. Alcohol is not a main character in a lot of people's lives and probably wouldn't bother them whether you drink or don't drink.
Yeah.
So that's quite refreshing.
I guess maybe we as people who drank a lot maybe sometimes naturally assume that alcohol is the main character, like you say, in other people's lives, and for a lot of people it's probably just a passenger.
100%.
You know what I mean? In dating, so let's talk about in relationship.
Yeah.
Because I've, from a personal experience, and a lot of my friends that have got sober in relationship, has often led to the end of relationship for numerous reasons, whether that's both people partied and then one doesn't, or whether that's like a bit of self-discovery, or maybe having to do the selfish journey. What's been your experiences in that, of sort of maybe yourself getting sober or people within your community getting sober, and how to deal with it from both perspectives? Because that was, for me, tough, because it shone a big light on a complete area of relationship that I was like, this isn't going to end well.
Yeah. Well, because I was single when I first stopped drinking, I didn't have it where I was getting sober whilst in a relationship. So I don't have that experience. But I did interview a lot of girls for the first book about this. And responses were like crazy, because so many people, all of a sudden, it kind of shone a light on problems in their relationships that they hadn't have considered before. And like, I had the maddest interviews with people. Like, some people actually like discovered their sexuality when they stopped drinking. Like, one girl said she'd always dated men, she got sober, and then she was like, fuck yeah, I think I like women. Like, and that ended her current relationship. And a lot of people said like it was just like the sort of fog had lifted. Some people said they found it really hard to like bond with their partner, because what they'd realised is that their relationship had been based around drinking, and that every night they would come home and they would drink, and that was like the thing that they had in common. And all of a sudden it stopped, and they didn't know how to bond with each other. And I also interviewed like a relationship counsellor, and she was saying, I think it was like 80% or something. It was a ridiculously high stat of problems that she gets are based around alcohol and, you know, drunk arguments and things like that. She was like, alcohol is always so involved in breakdowns of the relationship. So there's it from that two sides, where the relationship can break down because you get sober and realise that drinking is the thing that you had in common, and also it highlights other areas. And I think that's probably true of everything, you know, like when you get sober, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I work too hard. I think I drink too much coffee. Like, because you've removed that thing, you start becoming aware of other behaviours that aren't that healthy for you. Yeah. So I think like in a relationship as well, people like, it's you unplug, and maybe you've been quite like just going on autopilot for that whole time. So it definitely happens to so many people. And I've seen it, even like people in the community that you see that have like broken up with partners because they've got sober and the other person hasn't liked it.
Yeah, and it's interesting the other way around as well, isn't it? Because I think that's something I really want to enforce in this episode, is it's not a judgment on people in relationships that still drink, because it's fucking hard for those that still drink, that are trying to support a partner going sober, because there's two ways about it, right? I guess for me it was a case of, this isn't good for me anymore and I'm gonna make myself better, and maybe that shone a light on lifestyles not working. But I also have experience of friends who, you know, their partner's been in real addiction and gone to AA or NA and been in recovery, and part of that process has been needing to break free from a pretty supportive, loving relationship, but the only way they can break the shackles of like what they were used to or what that relationship reminds them of was actually ending a relationship. So it can be hard from the other person's perspective, even if they don't drink much. So it's really tough, isn't it? Because you're essentially, like we say, it's so nuanced, because you have to be selfish, but equally you have to try and figure it out. So there's no right or wrong in this scenario in relationship, I don't think. I just know from my personal perspective, it really shone a light on, you know, me wanting to get up at 6 a.m. versus someone getting home at 6 a.m. was just never going to work. And like you also said, it shines a light on emotional connection and where was that coming from? Because if that bond was based around nights out, is that a long-term thing that's really going to benefit both of you long-term? Probably not.
No, it's a really difficult one. I think, like, I mean, in AA, they kind of tell you not to date in the first year as well and things like that. So there's all that to take into consideration. And I'm not saying this for everyone, but I am a fundamentally different person to the person I was when I was drinking. Like, so if you're in a relationship with someone and they get sober and completely change who they are, it's like you're with a new person. So it's like, I'd suddenly gone from wanting to go out every weekend and get absolutely rat-assed to being like, oh, should we go to an alpaca farm? Like, you just become...
Why is it alpaca farms? I do the exact same thing. I'm like, are they goats or are there alpacas? Let's go.
It's a very good alpaca farm near me.
Is there?
Is there?
Very, very good.
There you go.
everyone loving it. Oh my God, can we go to an alpaca farm and do a live podcast?
Yeah,
I used to take MDMA and stroke rugs, and now I'm soberly like stroking alpacas.
That's what I mean. You become a different person. You want to do different things, like, and that I do feel sorry for the other person as well, because it must be a shock to them, because you're like, wow, you're this like whole new person. I think like, I don't know, I always say sometimes it feels like I've joined a cult with sobriety, because I'm like, it's amazing, it's the best. But I'm like, gosh, I've been brainwashed.
I think that's the thing to say as well, isn't it? It's like, it's easy to, as a sober person, to look at your partner that still drinks and being like, you don't get it, this is about me. But I can see why they could end up resenting you in a way, because it's like, well, that's not the person that I thought you were.
Yeah.
And they can be happy for you, I think. But there must be a difficulty for them, because you're essentially, like you say, like, those Friday nights, those Saturday nights, those like Sunday lunch sessions are gone. And like, I'm the same as you. I'm still the same human somewhere in it, but like, I was saying to you the other day, like, my 2 years feels like 20 years of my life. I don't remember really beforehand. So it is like someone's meeting someone new for the first time. And they might not like that person either.
And I think
Smarmy
it's hard.
bastards.
So smart. I think it's so hard when that person doesn't have a bad relationship with alcohol, because there's just no explaining it to some people sometimes. They're like, what, you can't just have two? You're like, no. And they're like, no, I don't get it. So it's so hard when to you it's the biggest deal in the world. But like you were saying earlier, with people not having alcohol as like the main character, they don't get it. It's such a big deal to us. But to not drink to other people is like the smallest deal. They're like, I can not drink, that's easy. So it's that failure to understand as well.
Should we try and offer some, I guess, like practical advice to anyone that's thinking, who might be like newly single and sober, about tackling sober dating? Have you got any advice?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is going to every date, like trying to be the most comfortable that you can, because when I was drinking, like, I don't know, I would get dressed up for a date in like heels and like tiny dress, and I'd feel so uncomfortable, and I'd be like, oh, do you know what, it's fine, I'll just drink and then I'll feel better. So like, wear things that you're super, super comfortable in. I think like I would always say like a confidence playlist, like get a good playlist on before you go out, feel your best, you know, maybe you can recommend some good songs. And then also I think meeting a friend beforehand, like especially, I don't know, women I think are so good at hyping each other up. So I used to go meet a friend for drinks before I go on a date, and then she'd be like, you look amazing, you look incredible, blah, blah, blah. I'd go into the date being like, yeah, like I think that's always a really good one. I think meet them at a place that you feel comfortable with, maybe somewhere that you're familiar with as well, somewhere that you know does really good like alcohol-free options. And activity dates I think are always the one, because if you're just sitting opposite someone and you're just quizzing each other, you can get quite anxious, you can like, it's not very relaxing. And if drinking is the only kind of focus, so I would say like a mini golf, a flight club, anything activity based I think is always fun, at least in the beginning.
Any other kind of activity-based things you can recommend?
God, I went kayaking on a date once, and that was
dual kayak or separate kayaks?
He had his own kayak, which looking back now, but the weird thing was when he got it out the boot, he had a load of ladies' shoes in his boot, which is the weirdest fucking thing.
That's like Criminal Minds serial killer shit.
Still got in the kayak with him, didn't I? I don't know why I thought
really
that was a
red
good
flag.
idea. I know. So he tried to explain it to say it was part of their rugby team's fancy dress, but
Even
I was
worse.
like, I'm just not buying this.
No, rugby guy, female shoes in the boot, kayak.
His own little blow-up kayak. I was like,
kayak. Okay.
I'm definitely going to die. Like, I'm 100% going to die. But no, I didn't. I'm here to tell the tale. That one was, fun. I think there's so many good like places, especially if you're based in like London or something like that, like Fair Game, Electric Shuffle, Clay's virtual pigeon shooting. There's like literally anything and everything these days that you can do. So
I'm a big fan of a walking date.
Yeah.
Like that's how me and my partner kind of bonded, was walking. And we'd like, she's sober, and we'd go get coffee and we would just walk for an hour on lunch break or whatever and just talk. And that was
they've been
a really nice way
since lockdown,
connecting.
I think people are more accepting that is actually a thing.
You know why? I think anyways, my process is like, I think for me in sobriety, being a little bit more introverted, I'm fine sitting across a table from someone. But I think naturally when you drink, you kind of, you have a couple of drinks and you're kind of like looking across the table and you're doing your thing. When you're sober, like eye contact is harder in a dating scenario. So walking, I think you're able to kind of be deep and fun and chat, but without having to constantly be staring at someone in the eye. So you kind of get to know someone really intimately, but without that like real intense thing. And you might like brush each other's shoulders, and that's like quite cute. But you're not in this like brutal intensity of a bar.
I think a walk also has a natural end, because I think that's the hard thing about sober dating as well. Like when you're drinking, you just carry on until like 2 a.m. and like we just think it's a great idea. But there's always that awkward like trying to end a date when you're sober. They're like, oh, okay then, like all right, shall we? Like so I think with a walk or something like that, there's kind of a natural end to it. 'Cause you're like, well, when we get to this place, and then you can kind of decide if you want to go somewhere else. Or I think
the kayak, there's a waterfall and you're just
just go on there. They give you an hour on the lake, so you're like, I can do an hour and then get back.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose like now, I haven't really thought about it before, but I suppose mine and Sarah's dates have sort of like maybe pivoted slightly. But I think it's a little bit different, because I guess like dates are few and far between when you have kids.
Yeah.
And since having Zach, and then like normally if we're, you know, it's rare that we'll go, oh, shall my mum and dad have Zach for the night so we can go out on a date? It's normally like someone's, I don't know, birthday or wedding or whatever it is, which is normally like a drink revolved date. But I think what has happened is when we have done it, it's now been very much around food.
Yeah.
And I think that was for me, like when I stopped drinking, I was really getting into my food. So now it's like more fine dining dates, which has been fun. And actually like I do a lot of research now before going out and being like, oh, this place has got an amazing like non-alc menu. Gives also a chance for us to get some content for the old pod.
Oh yeah, always needed.
Like, sorry, Sarah, it's not about date night. It's purely about Adam Hanling's 0% content.
Which was insane, by the way.
There you go.
Whole menu. So like, I guess like now it has like pivoted from perhaps doing stuff, whereas before like we'd be like, oh, you know, mum and dad have got Zach for the night. Let's go out in town and we meet someone and we get like, you know, just drink. And when I say a lot, like she's never been able to drink a lot anyway.
Yeah.
I mean more me just going, let's get fucked up. And then like her passengering to the point where she's like, I want to go home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Like, so it has kind of pivoted somewhat, but into doing something that we both kind of enjoy. That, you know, she can have a glass of wine if she wants to. She might, or she might not. And I can, you know, experience the alcoholic and non-alcoholic stuff.
Yeah.
The non-alcoholic stuff. And it's been good, but I haven't really thought about how they changed. And then the walking thing, we've done a lot more like walking, and days out, and Zach loves it as well. Like when we go out and do stuff, and he's got so much energy, it's a good excuse to burn it.
Yeah, you just run around.
Let's talk about communication in relationship, right? If you're a sober person or a sober curious person and your partner still drinks and or is a caner, how do you find communication with that? Because say, for example, you're at a wedding or an event or whatever, and you're like getting towards the end of your social battery and your partner's like fucking on one.
Yeah.
Communication's key, right? And I think the breakdown of a lot of relationships comes through that.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for people on, and I know it's very partner dependent, but on kind of how to approach those situations with a partner who may be having a really good time, but you're ready to wind it in?
Yeah, I think the key is to have the communication beforehand, because it is hard to communicate with drunk people. You could be saying it in the loveliest way, like using all the right buzzwords, but if they're pissed, they don't want to fucking know. Like they do not want to know. So I think setting those boundaries beforehand and being like, listen, if you want to stay out and you want to get drunk, that's fine. I'm going to have my own alternative plan of I'm going to leave at this time. Like I think setting those things, like I always, even if I'm out with friends or relationships, I always think of a plan of if I want to leave at X, Y, Z, how am I going to do that on my own? So that kind of thing I think is important. And having those conversations beforehand, and especially if like it's going to result in an argument the next day, have that communication. I just think avoid it when that person is drunk. So they call it, like, if you want to speak to someone about their drinking, you should do it in green light moments, which are moments when they're not doing the activity. So when it's like really chilled and you're having a nice conversation, you'd be like, oh, we're going to so-and-so's wedding next week, like just so you know, I'm not going to drink, like if blah blah blah. I think do it in those moments. You can't communicate with drunk people. It's
really difficult, that, and I relate to that a lot, because I think a lot of situations I found in a relationship since going sober and alcohol was still involved was like a drunk person, and it's not their fault per se, but if they're not a very good communicator sober, they think they're a very good communicator drunk. And a lot of those, whatever frustration it is, emotion, trauma, it all spills out at like 1 or 2 a.m. And it's very difficult as a sober person, because you're like, either A, I want to go home, B, we're already home and I'm trying to go to sleep, or C, this is not a conversation for now. And I think you're bang on. It's like having to try and coach people through that. But then it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think as sober people, sometimes we sound fucking patronizing.
Yeah.
And you're not trying to be. And it's like, it's not because I'm drunk. We need to talk about this. And it's like, yeah, but this isn't the time for this conversation. Yeah. That's hard.
It is hard.
It's almost like being like a bomb defusal expert, isn't
it?
Yeah. And you're like, how do I deal with this in a way that is gonna work?
Yeah, because you don't want to say like the wrong thing or the thing that's... And it's so hard because, like I said, you could say things in the most diplomatic, nicest, non-patronising way, that the way that person receives that information. There's this really interesting study about people drinking and the way they perceive others' facial expressions. So they like showed them loads of different facial expressions and asked a load of sober people what they were, whether it was like disgust, anger, and they kind of all got them bang on. And then there was people that were drunk and they looked at them and they kind of got a lot of them wrong, or like they perceived one that was a bit, that most sober people perceived as neutral, as being like really angry. So even if your face is like so neutral, or you're like just being really chilled about it, they might think, oh, she's like disgusted at me, or she's looking down at me. So the way you perceive faces is different. So even that, you can be having the nicest conversation, you might even be smiling, and they're like, oh god, they're being like sarcastic, or like it's just really hard to communicate with people. So I think you have to disengage where possible and try and avoid it, which is hard. And that's why I think set that beforehand, of like, just so you know, I'm going to be leaving at this time. If you don't want to come, that's absolutely fine. Set those things beforehand, so you're not having that drama at the time.
No, that's great advice. And then something I wanted to kind of dive into, which is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. How, or do you have any advice if you think your partner is drinking problematically or is potentially in an addictive cycle? Do you have any advice or any thoughts, or is there any research on sort of how to approach that? Because we all know that getting sober has to be a decision you make for yourself, but it's very difficult, imagine, in relationship to be dealing with someone who might have problematic drinking.
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing charities. First of all, so AdFam is a really good one, which is about like people who have got loved ones who they think might be in addictions. They offer a lot of help and advice. Same with NACOA, but that's more how to speak to a parent's drinking, but I think a lot of the advice would probably be the same. So the green light moments is like a big thing. So choose good opportunities. Don't necessarily do it while they're drinking or as they're about to open the fridge to get a bottle of wine, because it's just not going to go down well. The other main advice that they sort of talk about is coming from the perspective of how it makes you feel, rather than being like, you're drinking too much, you're doing this, to be more like, when you drink too much, it makes me feel unsafe. So that it's about how it's making you feel rather than having a go at their behaviour. I think they're probably like two of the key ones, but as charities, they're like really good. You can go to them and speak to them, but yeah, I think that's the best thing you can do, and always come with so much like love and compassion rather than any kind of moaning or nagging. I think is.
So I guess essentially it's like the notion of approaching it maturely and just hopefully saying something that plants a seed. Yeah. Because we know we're never going to convince anyone to change their relationship, right? But maybe that seed over 3-4 months might change.
And I think you can, this is going to sound really sneaky, but I think you can do it in a sneaky way as well, of like, so my dad, he had a stroke about 3 years ago, and the doctors basically said like a large part of it we think is because the amount that you were drinking. And so afterwards he really had to cut down, but he was quite hesitant to do so. So I started like bringing him non-alcoholic beers to get him like excited, and like brands that I knew that he would know, like a Heineken or something like that. And then he started getting really interested in non-alcoholic beers, and we made it like an exciting thing that we would bond over. I'd bring him, he'd give me his opinions, and I'd be like, I really value your opinions on this. And like things like that get people interested more than nagging and more than bringing the negativity. It's showing them the positivity. And like, you know, if you are worried about that person, why don't you suggest next week, let's go and do something fun that doesn't revolve around alcohol, and get them in that way rather than the negative side of it. I think like even when people tell you like these are the bad things about drinking alcohol, people are like, I don't care, they just carry on listening, like they just carry on drinking. But they seem to listen more when you talk more about the positive, and you'll see it on like Instagram. If all my content was about alcohol is bad, alcohol is this, people just switch off. But if you're like, this is what sobriety's done for me, it's really positive, it's really amazing, people are more interested. So I think if you come at it with that angle as well, of like, take them out, do different stuff, get them interested in non-alcoholic drinks, show them the benefits rather than just moaning at them about why it's bad.
Nice.
That's great. Are there any sober dating apps?
There's a couple, but they sort of float around, and a lot of them are US based.
Right.
There does need to be one here. I just don't think there's enough people on it. Do you know what I think will help now that more men like you were talking about it, because I think the first like sort of like 3 years of me doing this, it was mainly women talking about this. And we said for ages, let's do a sober dating event. But we were like, do you know what, we'll only sell tickets to women, like it would be so pointless. I think now there are so many more men talking about sobriety, which is incredible, that I think it might start to become more of a thing, hopefully. So maybe we'll do a little sober dating event.
Great. Well, Millie, thank you so much for all your advice as ever.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
And I'm so glad you've come to see us in Acne.
Can I just come back every season?
Mate, 100%.
Why not?
Please.
Resident Gooch.
Yeah. Oh my God, I would love that.
I think we should. I think we should just make a staple part of the seasons.
Perfect.
Now. It'd be good. And not that you need it, but best of luck with the book. I'm very excited for it and for you.
Thanks, guys.
So
you're the best.
Until next time.
Thanks.